Hey everyone, welcome back, Trika. Yeah, so, just felt like playing some Blitz and figured I'd stream it. So, let's see what I can find as far as games. Alright, 2700. I've gotten 2600s the last couple of times. Alright, so now both of these are interesting. Let's go for a Roxy style position. Do I go here directly? Yeah, I probably should. Yeah, so black gets this d4 square, but I get a pretty pleasant bind, and this pawn is never going anywhere. Yeah, at some point I'll probably do this. Think about things like this, but I don't think there's any reason to play that now. Could move the queen up, so I have the option to take with the queen and cover this square. Do I do that before I castle? I like the look of it. And just castle. Black can play knight g4, I don't mind taking. So bishop b6. So I'm thinking a setup like this, basically. Maybe actually F rook to d1. Oh, with the queen side this open, I probably wouldn't castle that way. Because black has pretty ready play to just tear open the queen side. I wouldn't play c4 if I were going to castle queen side, I'll put it that way. Maybe I'll just go a3, b4 now. Let's see what black does if I go here. Ah, that's a nice tactic. Takes. So I have to go here, but I don't really mind that. Because this knight's going to be misplaced on a5. This is a funny pattern, though. I have no good way to defend this. Since I've played a3, and the queen is covering knight e3. So this I'm happy with, though, because this square I plan on using. This knight's nearly trapped, and this pawn is weak. Yeah, something like this. Jump in here. Now he just loses a6, unless he wants knight c4. That's fine. Knight c4, I'll just take it and go f3, and then my knight's coming in here. Because this knight is really dominated by these pawns now. Yeah, and it can't go to c5 because I'll always have b4. So generally black's counterplay in these kinds of positions is oriented around f5. But I think I should be able to make some serious threats on the queen side before black can get a meaningful f5 in. Yeah, no random tactics like knight d5. So I'm just going to play rook c1 next. This pawn is loose. Is it worth playing b3 first? b3, rook c5, b4. Black could always play rook c2 anyway. Yeah, it's also, in a blitz game, this is not something worth spending that much time on. Let's just go here. Yeah, so now just start pressuring these pawns. Yeah, actually, I don't think black has a good way to defend this. Queen a6, I suppose? Queen could come in here. I'll probably just go queen c4. Or I could go a4. But no, I don't see a reason to do that. b5, so now queen c3. Checks. Do I mind queen f2? No. Something like this to watch out for, but I can just go queen c2 at some point. a4, so black just keeps defending. Queen here, queen f2, queen b5, that's just fine. Actually, queen f2 I'll probably just take here, because then I have some threats. And if black goes knight e8, then I'm just happy on general principle. So black goes queen here. Where do I want to have this rook? So rook here, queen f2 is black's idea. Maybe just go queen c3. Maybe I'll just do this and transfer the knight to f5. Maybe I'll just do it now. Hey, Omdel God. Not at the moment. Perhaps in the future. Yeah, and I think just queen c3 here. I could just take d6 as well. Let's keep it simple. With the queens off the board, the 2-second increment is plenty of time to win this. Yeah, now I just take this. And I take this. I could also take f7 here. Yeah, let's just take this. Keep it simple. Queen f4, I don't mind. Queen here. Ah, and this is a nice finish. Back rank. Good game. So that was pretty methodical. Take a look at it in a bit. But that pawn on d5, that structure, despite the quote-unquote bad bishop, is really good for white. Yep, and we'll go for my favorite, this old school win, or white does this exchange. This line's a little annoying to try and win. D3. Where's this? So let's go here. Depending where this knight goes, I'll do something slightly different. So it goes for a6, takes. I should review these lines a little, because this line feels pretty innocuous, but it's easy to end up a little worse strategically. It's true, it does block my c-pawn. At the same time, I don't... Well, it depends, because I don't usually want to take here. Yeah, I have mishandled this slightly. Because fixing this is a little annoying. Maybe I'll just go here now. My idea is to go knight e4. Bishop here, I just go back to e7. Knight f4 bishop. Knight here, bishop here is also a little annoying. I could go just knight e7 here and aim here. That makes sense to me. Yet I think no fuss about going here with the knight. Really? I don't think white wanted that trade. Unless there's, yeah, so white goes for this. Knight takes, knight h5. I don't mind this. White can play f5 if they want. I'll just, oh, f5, knight h5. That is a problem. So let's dip the knight back. I could take knight h5 and take here. Here. Maybe I'll just go here so I can go knight f4. This stops white from playing queen h5, which is the most annoying thing white can do here. Yeah, I want to review this a bit after. This isn't fully satisfactory. So white goes here. Could go queen g4, takes. I thought I could just take. If we trade queens, I don't mind this kingside damage so much. Yeah, if he has something here, he'll have to show me. Because bishop h7 I can take, there's no tactic. Queen h5, I just go to h6. Queen takes. So knight h5 now, I assume? Yep. I guess this is a bigger problem than I realized with the bishop here. Yeah, probably just here. Maybe I'll take this way, actually. No, this bishop needs to be secured. Yeah, I'm gonna look for queenside counterplay at some point like this. F2. I can go here now, though, and look for counterplay on this side. White's knight is stuck. What? Well, won't complain about that. Now I can do this, too. Yeah, no, he played really well strategically. Seems like he just lost the thread a bit. Knight h5. Alright. h1. Just c5. Maybe I should have played rook c8 first. There's rook b1, yeah. Let's get that pawn. If white wants rook b5, I'll at least play a6 and force the rook to a5, where it's pretty awful. Yeah, I should have excellent winning chances here. Just b6, this pawn is weak. Bishop e6 shores up my whole position. Do I take that? No, I do this. I'm going to take with the bishop, so I can play rook a5 without pushing white's king closer. I could play c4. Actually, let's do it this way, so there's no c4 for white. Just move the king up. I think I want to trade to a pure rook endgame if I get the chance. Yeah, because I should be able to win that pretty comfortably, I think. So let's go ahead and do that. Goes back to d3, but now I have rook a5 at least. Just have to watch the time now. This endgame is very good for me. So take this square, play f5, f4. If he plays rook f1, maybe I go here. Next goal is to free up my rook. Although it's tying down his king. Oh, that was just an oversight. Ah! That just botches the win, unfortunately. I can play this out, but now it should definitely be a draw. Yeah, I forgot about c4. Let's see if I can make anything of this. He wants to try and win. Cute. Well, alright. So I think I can just keep the king here in the center. Oh, well, he just takes the draw. Good game. Not a clean game, unfortunately. Well, we both kind of swung it back and forth. Yeah, let me give him a couple more, and we'll analyze when this series is over. I've been trying out this line for white. This line in the Terrace French. Found it a little annoying with black. Theoretically, I think after c5, black is more than fine. But you can set black some problems in these positions. Bishop takes. This I thought was supposed to be too optimistic. Takes. Taking. This feels like it's leaving black too open. Should I take now? I think I take now before black can retake with a minor piece. Black does that. How much initiative do I have if we just trade queens here? Trade queens, knight f3, maybe f6, bishop e3. I think I can cause black some hassle there. The other option is just castle, but then black plays knight f6, and I don't think I'm getting anywhere. Yeah, let's mess up castling while I still can. Do I go to c4 here, or to f3? I think c4. Black might do bishop b4 check. I don't mind playing king e2. here. Now I have this check, which forces king e8. It's not too much, though. Maybe I just check here. I like this better, actually. Black basically wants to play this to shield their position. And then at some point, f6, king f7. Let's see where the bishop goes. Here. I think I throw in this check. Well, no, because that just gives black e7. Maybe I go b4, bishop b2, actually. Put pressure on this diagonal. Knight d5, bishop b2, f6, knight e3. Let's try that. Hey, Brightonian. Yep, I've heard that more than once. Yep, so cover c3, target g7. Just go here. So it goes for this. This I thought just takes, rook c1, a little better. Yeah, g takes I expected. So just cover the fork. Just go knight e3. Black still has to finish their development. Yeah, black might go here. Oh, this? Well, but this I thought should give me a clear advantage. Does knight e3, I'm going to intersperse this check. I don't think I did, to be honest. Something better than to trade queens? Because I think black developed pretty quickly there, if I don't. Knight f6 comes, and then there's nothing to target. Here, though, I'm quite happy. Yeah, this endgame, I think, is actually close to lost for black, if not lost. Checks. King e6. Yeah, now here, or maybe I go here, actually. Because black's threatening to run away with f5, but this might just win material. Or I could go king d3, f5, and then rook over. Yeah, actually, let's just do the principled move. Yeah, to be honest, that is actually more than I would have guessed at first, too. Rook here. So this check, rook here, doesn't lead anywhere. Let's go here. Yeah, let's try and be a little more precise this time around. That last endgame was not. Threatening to win a pawn with this check. Yeah, so black just basically has a miserable job defending a lot of pawns now, and this queenside majority is pretty effective. If black ever goes a5, this pawn is a nightmare, and if the pawn is here or here, I just attack it. Yeah, this is just lost for black. King up. Yeah, I think just check. Yeah, throw in this check and then play g3 seems the cleanest. Yeah, and still just not even counterplay, really. Check, king takes, doesn't get black anywhere. Actually, checks f4 is even cleaner. And if black loses this pawn, the game is just over. Good game. Yeah, so black resigns, actually, before even losing material, but it's completely understandable. Alright, try one more French. I have not seen this in forever. So, principled response, always just play d5 and c5. And when white goes for this, go for d4. I played against this in the Pro Chess League once. This same structure. Yeah, objectively this is not great for white, but it does create some useful squares. Yeah, let's see how well I remember this. There's knight d5, bishop e7, queen e2. Yeah, I figured as much, Cloudset. So yeah, what do I do next, though? I mean, what does white do next is the other big question. I don't think there's any point in going crazy. Just develop. I could go for this. a6, a4 creates some weaknesses I could try and use. Not really, though. I think a6. I think that's an excellent idea. That's Smith. Yeah, and b5. B5, a4 is annoying. Okay. b5, a4, rook b8. Takes. Let's try it. He plays the opening very, very quickly. Surprises me. Yeah, I didn't even consider a4, it seems. Yeah, I could even think about queenside castling here. Now, do I want to trade this off? My instinct is yes. Yeah, one step closer to freeing up the light squared bishop. Takes, queen here, bishop back. What about just... No. Let's do this, actually. Rook f5. This feels pretty good for me now. Like, that can't be right. Giving me this and knight c3? I think he must have missed knight c3. Unless I'm missing something. Queen g4, I take on e4. That's fantastic. But yeah, it devastates the pawn structure. Gives me this passed pawn. Yeah, the gap between a 2500 and a Magnus is pretty enormous, I'll be honest. Oh, I have g6 here. I think actually g6 just wins. That makes life easier. Yeah, I think 3-2 is a lot better. It just eliminates most of the flagging dynamics. Because if you're playing 3-0, then you find yourself in situations where, you know, you have the choice to go into a better endgame, But then, you know, if they have 40 seconds and you have 30, you won't want to do it. Hey, Michael Scott Chess Company, welcome. You know, you could follow a pattern from the show and sell yourself to chess.com. Do you not have taken on g7 with the queen? So if you mean here, if queen g7, I have knight e2 check, followed by queen takes f5 check. And that's winning for me. After knight takes e4. So when knight takes e4. Yeah, the only moment white could play queen g7 was this. But then, I mean, even just queen f5, queen h8, king d7, this was my first plan, and this is just winning for me. Hello, Shachopa, and welcome. So let's take a look at these games. So we've got 4 to look at now. Okay, so we've got this O'Kelly Sicilian. So the idea of this line is that if white just follows patterns and plays d4, there's takes, takes, and e5. And you don't have this square, which you'd normally like to use. So the moves the moves I like here are c3 and c4, exactly. c3 is actually what I've played in the past. And it gets you to a sort of Alpin, no surprise. And Brendan Fraser. I'll take that comparison any day. Yeah, so I've played c3 historically. c4 leads to these Maroczy structures. I don't know it super well, but I do love this pawn structure for white. e5, just come back to c2. Yeah, and we get all this. Just develop. So a3, okay, this is a good pattern to know. Because after a3, I was thinking of this pawn as fine because I just expect, well, I just expect to be able to defend it, to be honest. It's almost always safe here. Because usually you can just play b3. But this is good to note that it's pretty vulnerable in this particular setup. The Smith-Bora. I mean, I think, especially if you're trying to get the handle of how to play against the Sicilian, I think it's a phenomenal first opening and a decent not first opening against the Sicilian. Because it teaches you, right, to develop quickly and learn how to put pressure on people. It's not playable forever, but it's playable quite far, even in classical. Yeah, so knight e5 first. Interesting. Wait, so what happens after? Oh, there's knight b3, of course. Yeah, so this is a bit annoying. I mean, I can always take here, go here, and use d5. That's not what I wanted to do. What actually should I do here, says Save the Machine? Yeah, that was a mistake on my part. So a3, good to know. Takes, knight a5. But now I have knight d5. And the difference is that since black already pulled my queen to e3, there's no knight b3. And now this structure, I mean, this might look like a quote-unquote bad bishop. And it's not the best bishop in the world, but even if black plays b5, these give me so much space. Like, these knights can't use so many squares. Like, this f6 knight in particular, I mean, you'll see it when I play f3. It's just miserable. And black can't use c5 because I have b4. I mean, Esserman does it just fine. If he can beat Van Oele with it, it's playable for a very long time. Yeah, so that is one thing what Michael Scott Chess Company said, and that's incidentally what I've done against them more than once. You just play knight f6 on move 2 and go to the Alpin. Or the Alapin, I should say. That's, I think, a good response to it in a practical sense. Yeah, now at this point, this structure again is just already very nice for white. You know, I just play f3. Black has no real plans here. I mentioned before, if black has more pieces on the board, like a light squared bishop, moving the knight back in f5 is what I would want to go for here. You can go for some kingside play, or sometimes you can target this pawn. You know, very King's Indian-esque. But here it's just too slow. Like, this is jumping in with tempo, this rook needs to be resolved, and these pawns are loose. Alright, if this pawn's on b7, I think it's a much more interesting game. But as it is, this is just pretty miserable. a5, jump in. So it does want me to play b3 first here. I thought about this a fair bit during the game. Because the idea is I can improve this pawn with tempo and then play rook c1. My main conclusion was honestly that in a blitz game you shouldn't use that much time on it. But let's see, so if I go b3 first... Oh, this is actually... Okay, this I missed. Because if black goes here, I just trap the rook. And this is a nice tactic. So I shuffle my queen to c4 with tempo, and now I've just got this. So that's a good point. This rook's not just being chased around, it's actually running out of good squares. And so what happens if it hides on c4? This is more what I was thinking about. What if the rook just goes here? Oh, of course. For some reason, I thought about black could take, and here. But then rook a7 just wins. Thanks for the follow, Enta. But if black doesn't take, then if black goes here, I just attack the rook. Either way. And now black can't play b5. So for some reason, I was thinking, just during the speed of a blitz game, I was just imagining that black could play b5 and black could prevent rook a7. But black doesn't get both. So this b3 is actually a very nice harassing move. You know, structurally this is very pleasant, but b3 actually gives black unanswerable questions already. Yep, thank you for the follow. Catch the name. Zenny2323 and Stelaz, welcome. But yeah, again, this position's still just no fun for black. Oh yeah, and the computer just doesn't care about this queen coming in. Just play knight e7, knight f5 right away. Lets the rook in, targets d6. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, this is just extremely pleasant. And this, the computer, like I said, in a blitz game, it's always slightly scary allowing something like this. The computer just does not care, though. You can play h3 and hide on h2. You can play queen c3. When black has a grand total of 1 check, the queen by itself is not doing much. In a different position, it might do more. But in a classical game, I think it's worth reading things like this out. So b5. Yeah, and same thing. So it's saying just do this transfer earlier. Oh, this is hilarious. I like this move. Yeah, that makes sense. If black wants to keep defending this, the queen has to go completely passive. Queen f2 just doesn't accomplish anything. You take knight h5. There's, among other things, just taking e5. Even if you don't have a good offensive thing, this is one threat, and you play queen c2. My proudest chess victory? I'd say that's still my first GM win against Loke van Wely. Back in 09. See, I could have put pressure on more quickly, so now I do this. Queen e3. Yeah, black wants some kind of counterplay, which is understandable. It's strategically lost, but there really isn't any counterplay either. This structure is just miserable for black. Yeah, and one nice bit of tactics. So even here, right, because of the back rank, because of king h8, I have this check. Yeah. Thank you so much for the sub, Torland. And welcome back. So I have this right away, but I just decided to do this just for the sake of simplicity. I mean, black can go here. This doesn't work anymore, but these 2 extra pawns strategically winning. Could even get a 3rd pawn. But knight f7, of course, here is perfectly good. Yeah, and this just settles the game. Yeah, so this was a very satisfying game. The fact that this pawn's a little vulnerable to knight a5 is worth noting. But yeah, a lot of people with black, I've noticed, will play into this structure. And especially once this b-pawn is moved, this structure is absolutely miserable for black. Because this c6 square, white's just going to use it as an invasion point. But I would say, like, when I played the f3 lines for white in the Sicilian, like the 5f3 sideline, and I would say most of my high-level wins come from someone just allowing this. I have some other lines there that really give me trouble, which is why I think the main line is better, but... Yeah, exactly, Trika. Actually good here. But yeah, nice game. This next one was a draw, and this was much more back and forth. So with the updates to Stockfish, I think, might have actually used to label the French itself an inaccuracy. It doesn't do that anymore. Yeah, but it still labels the winnower an inaccuracy. So now every French game I play, you get this. Yeah, knight f6, I think the newest engines really like think black is absolutely fine here from what I've seen. Like, they just call this structure equal. But this tends to be a much slower game. If you want something more dynamic, I can't recommend the winnower enough. Like, both sides have huge positional edges and problems here. Which computer evaluation value do you consider winning? I would say not +1, but not too far above it either. Like 1.3 maybe. 1.3 I would say is very likely winning. Maybe 1 to 1.3 is plausibly winning. Just as a guess. But yeah. Knight f6 is actually a... Yeah, knight f6 is a very popular top engine move now. I mean, playing it, not just this, but playing into the French in general. Oh, what do you think of that book, Brightonian? One of my students, about 2200 USCF actually, has been going through that. Yeah, and white plays this exchange line. Yeah, this line is surprisingly annoying, I will say. Yeah, I've had trouble getting fully satisfactory positions against this. Because even here, it takes a little work for black to equalize. Or white plays e5 and sacrifices the d4 pawn for queen h5. Hey, welcome. Glad you're liking it. Yeah, welcome. Glad to see you here. I didn't know you watched my stream. Oh yeah, Think Like a Super GM by Michael Adams. Yeah, so knight c6. And the general idea of this move is if knight e2, now I like to go knight e7, bishop f5. And if knight f3, actually, I thought bishop g4 was good here, but knight e7, On the other hand, white's done quite pleasantly in both these positions. Why has knight f3 done so well for white here? Could just be more a statistical anomaly than anything. Knight e7. Oh, that's with knight d2. Wait, knight d2, what line is that with queen h5? Do you mean that really crazy line in the main line knight d2, knight f6 Tarash, where white goes knight f4 and black sacks the exchange? I mean, there's this whole line. Yeah, so if you want something interesting, you can play this. Objectively, I think this is completely fine for black. But yeah, this is the line that's being asked about. Knight f4 is the move that sets off all the fireworks. Takes, check, king here. Take here first, and then knight g6 check. I mean, you can play it if you want, but black gets a ton of play. I guess if you really know how to neutralize it, it can work out well. I think white has a lot of promise. I think the main line's here. I think this has a lot of promise for an advantage for white, though. If you really want some fireworks, then go for it. But I think white can do good fight. Like, this pawn structure is fundamentally better for white, which is why actually most French players play c5 on move 3. But I think white can play this out pretty well. And you can, yeah, as you mentioned, you can also just play f4 here. I think that's also promising for white. Yeah, that's why I almost always play c5 now. I mean, you can actually see in the opening bar, right? This is a pretty absurd difference in performance. So yeah, you can play it if you want, but it is worth noting that objectively I think black's okay. And you have other promising continuations, I think, against knight f6. Okay, so we go into this. Knight c6. a3. Yeah, the problem with this is you have to be ready for these queen moves. Yeah, both of these can be annoying. So this move, I like this structurally because it avoids the pin, and it gives you prospects of just trading this bishop, or at least opposing it. But yeah, you just have to be ready for these. I remember this being pretty annoying. Yeah, probably I should just give this another look, because this is the way to do it, I think, properly speaking. I haven't looked at queenside castling here. Yeah, but it seems like this is the way to go. Yeah, just deal with these moves as they come. Because, yeah, again, objectively, black can handle both of them. But this pin is annoying. I would tend to say the French is more advanced. So for one thing, there's several different ways you can play the French. But I would say you tend to reach very unique structures in middle games. So it's really something you have to learn on its own, because the way you play the French is kind of differently from the way you play any other opening. That's why I think a lot of e4 players, especially the ones who like clean games, like the ones who are more soundly structured, really hate facing the French, because you have to get into a lot of, again, weird positions where you're just going for more unusual structures or positionally risky things. You know, like these double pawns, for example. Like, black gives up the dark squared bishop and sometimes really damages the pawn structure. A lot of French lines are more about that kind of balance. Whereas in, say, e4, e5, right, both sides are pretty sound, and you're pushing more for those small edges. So in that sense, it's more complex. Yeah, so I like this. This is... Yeah, just knight a5 here. Castles. Actually, one thing I didn't appreciate, the reason I didn't play this, what I didn't appreciate is that with the bishop here, both of these knight moves actually lose to g5. So that's kind of a funny point to this, to playing h6, is that, again, white actually can't move this knight out. So already this is pleasant for black. But this is good to remember, because playing knight e2 and bishop g5, people do this all the time. So I want to keep in mind that this position, like, white doesn't have a good follow-up. Yeah, there's so many different rich, like you said, rich choices. I mean, against 3 knight c3, right, you have bishop b4, which is the really dynamic, double-edged, positionally risky line. You have knight f6, which is kind of the slow, complex, computer-approved line. And you have de, which tends to be a safer line. Although even within that, there's several different ways you can play. You can play d takes e4 and bishop d7, c6, or knight bd7, knight gf6. So there's a lot of ways you can play the French. G3. Yeah, and again I should play h6. Well, here it's much more obvious. This, I think, it's much more obviously good. I'm not sure why I didn't think to play this. Because it feels so natural here. White obviously doesn't want to take. Yeah, this was kind of an autopilot move. You could look at it, right? The nice thing about the Caro-Kann, right, is you never get the French bishop. But if you want to look at like what c5 achieves, because c5 is black's bread and butter in the French, just all the counterplay on d4. You might get some ideas there, yeah, especially if you play e6 against the fantasy. Yeah, knight c3, bishop b4, and then right, bishop d2 or bishop f4. It's a good line for black if you want a complex game with some French overlap. Yeah, this is nice. I underestimated this. Because this is actually a really powerful idea. Yeah, so as soon as he played f4, it's pretty clear. Yeah, I'm in trouble. Here. Yeah, at the end of the day, I just gave up a pawn to deal with this pressure. f6 is just asking for me to get my queen trapped or lose my knight. Yeah, and I'm not surprised. Yep, there's a winning tactic right here. Queen takes, yep, and just here. And black can resign. I mean, it's perfectly playable, right? It's not going to get an edge against a super GM who knows how to play against it, but it's certainly not worse for white, and it reaches very interesting positions. I'd say it's a more than good opening. I mean, it's super GM level, right? They all play, you know, the really lengthy variations of the advanced variation. Because that's where black has the hardest time settling things. Alright, good night, Trika. Yeah, so without calculating, this just looks so dangerous. And indeed, it loses on the spot. Yep, so white gets this, just trades off and knight h5. And black's gonna lose a pawn. Thanks for the follow-up, Brightonian. Yeah, so I thought white played really well up to this point. Then here, I don't know, it was like I said he lost the thread during the game. Felt like he got pretty distracted. Yeah, from what I've seen, like I know Lami's course, for example, on Chessable on the Caro-Kann recommends DE and E5 against the fantasy. So just a quick talk about the fantasy Caro. Like Lami's course recommends the concrete approach. And if you know exactly what you're doing, this is probably the fastest way to get the computer to spit out zeros. But this is super dangerous. There's a few ways that white can try and pressure black here. You really have, I mean, again, of course this is playable for black, but you really have to know what you're doing. I think, Brightonian, you mentioned this e6 line. If you just want to play a good game of chess, I think this is a good way to go. I mean, this is much more of a French bent. Thanks, Godsat, and thanks for the sub. Have a good one. If you want something to look into, a friend of mine, GM Zviad Azoria, likes to play this line with black. Oh yeah, I remember looking at that. Yeah, e6, bishop e3, gambit takes. And then wasn't it... I'm trying to remember, what was the line where white goes knight h3? It wasn't yet. Maybe that's not here. Well, knight d2 here. It doesn't block the c-pawn, but... So, it prevents bishop b4, but you're blocking in your bishop. You're not putting pressure on d5. So this is like this is the Terrace French where you've gotten f3 for free. But that's still bad. Like, you would much rather not have this move at all. Yeah, so Trika's f3 command does not apply to this position. It is not actually good here. But yeah, I think... Yeah, like I said, this line is objectively good for black, but there are a lot of ways you can lose within 15 moves in this line. Anyway, going back to the game. Yeah, so this, I mean, knight g6 was just laziness. I was thinking about things like this, or I was thinking about going h6 next, actually. And this idea, because positionally this feels pretty good with the doubled pawns and getting rid of the bishop pair. So this feels good on some positional level, but dynamically this is terrifying. Queen a5 check against the fantasy? I did not see that. Although it would not surprise me in the least if he did. Yeah, so saw all this. Yeah, again, white's just up a pawn here. Very pleasant. Rook f4 kind of invites this move. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what he wanted with this. I mean, maybe he has some kind of dream of going here and just checkmating me. Actually, this is probably what white was thinking, but I think it's just too slow. Let me turn this off. Yeah, and I don't know, it just seems like a brain fart. Unfortunate, because it was a really good game up to this point. I was in a lot of trouble. Yeah, and now I picked up the pawn. Yeah, this I think is not quite clean. Although it works out pretty well for me. So I want to pick up this pawn. And if rook b5, I think this is actually a big problem for white, because after this, if I get to play bishop c6, this rook is stuck forever. Actually, I think if I play bishop c6, this might just be dead lost for white. So white ends up having to give the... So white has to give the pawn back anyway. That said, in hindsight, maybe I go here first. If white plays something like rook b1 and bishop a6 to stop c5, then I've misplaced both their pieces at least, and I can start looking over here. So slightly sloppy. I forgot about rook b1. And this endgame is extremely promising. So just shuffling, pulling white's pieces back, and now going for this. Yeah, and this was just an oversight. Yeah, unfortunate. I just forgot about this. Yeah, not much else to be said, so I have to take. Yeah, maybe a little wiser. Maybe a little wiser here. I just accept the draw because this is dead drawn. Maybe just go here. AB takes. Shake hands in a few moves. Yeah, because this actually, funnily enough, this gets my rook trapped. So white's threatening to win now. But this endgame's not too difficult. Having this pawn to secure the bishop was also nice. Which one is the Tennyson Gambit? And this was, again, pretty straightforward. Keep the king towards the center. Keep the bishop on the diagonal. And there we are. Yeah, I'm going to take one more quick moment at this. One quick look at this. So what is the proper way to play? I thought it was takes c4, queen a5. I thought this was better for me than it seemed to be during the game. Because I've only faced this, I think, once before in a game, and I got a pretty solid advantage. Oh, queen b3 is a nice idea. But there's nothing earth-shattering here. Okay, so castles, knight f6, queen c2. So queen c2 threatens c takes and queen c6 check. Actually, this is nice. I missed this queen c2 idea. This forces some kind of concession, because again, if black plays something random, like bishop e7, this just wins. Right? So black has to do something awkward here. Yeah, queen c2 is quite clever. I remember that. Queen a6. Now a3. Ah, a3 to set up the queenside pawns. So if black just develops, takes. Black has to take with the c pawn, because taking with the e pawn just runs into problems here. Yeah, okay, and this is just great for white. Oh, Dennis Gadrick has a win here, back from 2013. Before he was even a GM, I suppose. Or when he was under 2,500, I should say. But okay. So that makes sense. So I can just... This queen c2 idea is nice. Yeah, any response is awkward for black. Alright, let's get back to a few more games. I'll say if any viewer wants to challenge me to a 3-2, feel free. I forget, I think I had some kind of command. Yep. Yeah, casual. Hang on. 2,700 question mark? Yeah. I'm gonna play a viewer. Sorry. Does it say that even if you challenge to a casual game? Yeah, let me double check. That might be... Maybe that's a lead chess setting on my end. Preferences. Game behavior. Oh. Alright, try challenging now. Try it now. There we go. I have... Alright. So, we'll get to both. Get to both of you. Pretty sure I can guess which Twitch viewer this is. And let's try another French. Alright, so we get the advance. A variation I've been looking at recently is actually this one. Yeah, by all means. And then going for the quick bishop d7, b5. So this is positionally very desirable at the cost of time. There's a couple ways white can respond to it. Bishop here. I can also transpose now. I can play knight c6, or takes, knight c6. Yeah, and white has both recaptures here. So knight c6 transposes to this gambit line. Granted, I think this line is good for black. Yeah, and you have to know what you're doing. But it's pretty promising. But for this game, let's play this line out. Alright, got a few challenges. This is a strong audience. 4 challenges, all over 2,000. Just take, and knight c6. Yeah, like I said, the downside to this is that you lose time. Developing this bishop is awkward. Sometimes this knight has to come here. Yeah, and white has exactly that in mind, stopping the bishop. So, for example, one problem black runs into in this position is I want the knight on f5, but then white has knight takes d5. So let me try something, actually. Let me play this. Slow as it is, gets my queen off a clunky square. Enables this. That's my goal setup. Again, this light squared bishop trade is great positionally, but I did spend 3 moves with my bishop, while white made 3 developing moves. I guess white lost 1 move moving their own bishop, but that's still 2 free moves for white. So that's the price you pay for getting this trade. b4. So this is often an idea, which white might go for. I go for a6. I mean, at some point, I'm really pushing my luck if I don't develop these pieces. Same time, this knight here can get hit by g4. That's another problem. What if I actually develop it this way? Let me try that, actually. Because the knight on f5 presents a pretty nasty target. A common theme for white in these positions is you develop this bishop, say here, you wait for bishop e7, g4, knight h4, takes, f4. And this kingside offensive is pretty terrifying. So black sometimes goes to g6 to avoid that, but then this knight is really clunky here. It has no good squares, and sometimes this is annoying. Yeah, black has good squares available for all their pieces, but getting the pieces to those squares is the question. So knight a4, coming here feels pretty natural. So one question now is knight here, takes, knight c4. Good square for the knight, leaves the king side a little vulnerable. Let's try it. Hey, welcome, Festia. Yeah, white might trade that off, but I don't mind it. I have to be slightly careful for this kingside, but it should be manageable, in my judgment. But I might have to play this before I castle, right? If I castle now, knight g5, g6, queen h3 is, again, pretty terrifying. h5, g4 is forced. And that's a battle I'd rather not be fighting. Same time, this knight is... White doesn't have a terribly convincing plan right now, though. Like, White doesn't have any pawn breaks, or a great way to add pressure. If White comes here, I might even look at this. So I think White's might be setting up for a future kingside potential. I might just go b6 here. Yeah, because White doesn't have any pressure here or any way to get to d6. So I think I can get away with this. Here. So queen c8. Actually, c7 makes more sense. This square feels bad on principle because of knights coming like this, but that's not happening in this game. Takes. Take with the rook. And have to be a bit careful about the king side, but I should be good to just castle. Maybe I should have taken on b3 first. 4, yeah, so White wants knight g5. I don't think I should take here first, although I could. Actually, let's do this and induce some trades. Because trading off all the rooks, like the more I secure my king, the more relaxed I feel here. There. Because positionally, strategically, this is very good for me. My minor pieces are much better than White's. So it's just the king I have to worry about. So I'm just going to play this the most straightforward way. Yeah, White avoids the trade, natural enough here. But I think White still needs a couple moves to develop serious threats. Like g4, g5. But I don't think White has time for it here. a4, so I could just grab this pawn. Knight b4, actually. Where is the queen going? Yeah, I can force White's queen back somewhere really poor here. In here. So... yeah, and now White's pieces are just too poorly placed. Good game. So we'll look at that in a bit once I've done these other challenges. Right, you there? Alright, so Carol Khan. We were talking about the fantasy. Originally, I don't really play it. Classical or Fisher line. Let's try something a little more just on the side, on the strategic side. So when you play the exchange, you could play the Panov, which is the quick c4 lines, or you can play this. Again, I've only heard this called the Fisher line. Maybe Brightonian knows the real name, if a formal name, if there is one. But this is basically like a good QGD. It's a QGD where Black's gotten perfect development. And I mean, don't get me wrong, that's still a perfectly fine position for Black. But it's quite interesting, I think. A knight here. So Black has two kind of ideas in this position. One is to develop and try to take control of e4. The other is to try and set up an f6 e5 play. So that one might very well be what black's going for here. Yeah, that opens a lot of lines for white. Let me just go back here. Common way to meet f6 play in general is with c4. This I thought should be good for me though, because this is a pretty standard IQB. I mean, certainly not horrible for black, but I do think I can press this pretty comfortably. And the best thing you could do with an IQP is trade off the opposite bishop. So I'm going to see how what black does here. Because this trade, I think, just makes your life so much easier. Black goes here, but now there's a pin. I'm perfectly happy with that, too. This trade I don't mind either, so I'm not going to bother stopping bishop g4. Do I just go rook e1, or do I go queen b3? Let's go rook e1. This is just the safest move in the position. Bishop here. Like I said, I'm perfectly happy with this trade on f3, so I'm not going to do anything about it. If black moves the bishop back, something like bishop here and knight d4 looks pretty promising. Thank you. Yeah, if you all like it, I will gladly do this again. Yeah, bishop back here. So now I'm thinking I just want to try and lean on black's position, look at this at some point. With the bishop back here, this knight d4 doesn't feel as useful. So I think I'm just going to develop the queen and rooks. I could go for maybe I could go for space here. Let me do queen b3 first. And now I'm going to think about this as well. Because if black pushes this pawn, I start getting some squares. But if black doesn't, I get some nice space, and this pawn becomes tougher to defend. So black goes b6 for the bishop's sake. But if black goes bishop here, then a5 will pressure this pawn pretty heavily. Not now, but later on I'm going to see about using this c6 square. Yeah, so let's just do this. And here. Oh, thank you. I just started streaming again regularly. So I hadn't been, but I will be. Yeah, and this IQP is kind of brutal because once you've taken this possibility away, it's just hard for black to do anything. These positions are just very tough to manage for a long time. Yeah, thank you so much for the sub, Michael Scott Chess Company. Yeah, so this I think makes a lot of sense. Manages b6, creates ideas of knight c5. I'm gonna create some new ideas of my own. Yeah, I don't see anything direct that looks terribly impressive. Yeah, this I don't think this is the best move here, but I don't have time to figure out the best move. And this is quite pleasant for white. Oh man, thank you so much, that's Zach Smith, for the sub. Actually, this does also give me this possibility. So maybe this is actually very strong. Queen here. Do I go rook e7 or do I take first? I think I take first, actually. Take first and then go rook e7. Because I have some tactics against this king. Being able to go here with check feels useful. And this, I have some tactics against f7. Rook e8, I'll probably just double. No tactics on f7 yet. Let's just put the other rook on e7. And knight g5 here. I think black's position is really in trouble. e5. So I could take it, but I think, yeah, just win the queen. Alright, good game. So I think just e5 there is too early. Because this IQP is just not fun, right? You don't have anything dynamic here on the king side or in the center. So I think here you want to look at either these plans or maybe these plans and look to use e4. Alright, got one more here. So let me have an analysis board ready. So I'll play this game, maybe one more if I get another challenge, and then we can go through those games more thoroughly. Okay, so there's a sideline here. I mean, it's not even really a sideline. It's a pretty major line. I mean, white can of course play the classic pianissimo stuff, but I like going for c3, d4 against this in general. What was the inaccuracy? I don't think it was queen b4. Here. Okay, now I get d4 in. Oh, rook a1. Huh. I wouldn't have thought of that as an inaccuracy. How do I handle this? Probably don't do anything dramatic here. I was looking at something, trying to do this, and then something really aggressive. But probably no rush. It's not fully satisfactory, though. Oh, knight g5 immediately. That makes sense. Okay, that's just really strong. d6. Maybe bishop g5 here. It feels like I've missed out on something already. What's the right way to handle queen e7? Maybe I should take on e5 before black can take back with the pawn. I'll be curious about that after this. We're 2200 plus FIDE. I would say you probably want to start looking at both, because at that point you're thinking about norm events. D5 feels weird here, but... Yeah, I mishandled this somewhere. Because black was getting a lot of pressure here. At that point, you're thinking about norm events, and that means people are preparing for you. And that means that playing just one can get quite frustrating. Thank you so much for the sub, Veschakampo. I would say though, if you could play one as long as you mix it up a lot within that one move. Right? Because you can play E4 and then have multiple responses to different lines. Same with D4. Yeah, at that point, you're thinking norm events, and that means you're thinking variety. Okay, speaking of thinking, I need to think time. So I want to try and make something against this bishop. I'm thinking about... takes. Well, now this feels pretty comfortable for white to me. I mean... it's hard to really judge, though. But I like my space here. G5. As soon as I see this is my fantasy. And let's do it. See you, Brightonian. Yeah, do I go for this or A5 first? Let's do A5. A4 first, sorry. I think this is tough for black, because I think I can handle the king side, especially with this outpost. And I'm going to start going crazy on the queen side. So do I have... I could just take and just run with my king. I'm going to try that, actually. Actually, I need to be more careful here. I could be getting myself in a lot of trouble. It's really useful for me that black doesn't have more pawns to press my kingside with. I think here I'm in time with all this, right? Knight f4, but I can play king f1. And that should do it. Good game. Yeah, I got a little risky at the end there. Shah Gambit, d4, c4. Sorry, remind me what the Shara Gambit is? Yeah, d5, I mean, black's a little cramped on space, but black has some play here. D5 and D6. Interesting. I don't know why is it starring out your third moves for white? Yeah, so go for this, c3, bishop b6, d4, queen e7. D5, d6. Maybe I should just... Actually, I guess on the other hand... Oh, d6. Just h3. I mean, the machine is quite happy to just block this. Just block this and take the space advantage, which makes sense to me. Because white also is going to get some time on this bishop. So this d5 idea works out pretty well. But h3 makes sense as a cleaner way to not play d5. I guess black has some ideas of this, but practically dangerous, but objectively good for white, I would think. Oh, Magnus played this against Eric Hansen a couple years ago. Yeah, so bishop g5. I think this is bad because I never want to do this. I don't get to do anything with this pin because I won't get knight d5. And black wants to do this anyway. Yeah, so I end up playing knight d5. But I wouldn't bother with this move. Right, it just ended up being a loss of time because I came back to e3 anyway. Yeah, so we get this closed center, more d4 style position. Yeah, g5, it felt like a little too much to me here because I get this knight is going to be so strong. I actually had a really nice game against Brandon Jacobson. It was in a more classic Italian h6 g5 line, but this same knight on f5 just ended up saving me. I mean, you can just play it in a more reserved way. Trading and castling, then looking for f5 later on. So I think with the knight getting here, this square is just too strong for me. Oh, and this makes sense. So this was an inaccuracy. I guess this is pretty dangerous. So going here, just to meet g4 with h4. Yeah, this doesn't work because of this. So stepping away to meet g4 with h4 and just saying my kingside's secure. Always easier to say when you've got the computer backing you up, but it makes sense here. And meanwhile, my knight's still going to get to f5 eventually through e3. So in fact, it just wants to give up a pawn just to get some play. Yeah, now black gets some serious play here on the king side. Can I play 1 to 2 more? Sure. After this game, I'll play another one, and then I'll look at the others. So knight f5 is bad here. I mean, it makes sense. It weakens my king's defense. So in this position, I can just go king f1. Alright, so queen f6. What's wrong with just taking this? Oh, this is coming. Okay, that's a nice resource. I missed this. Even here, I can't take this knight because knight e5 is so strong. Yeah, this would not be a good end. But okay, I can go here first. This is what I wanted to do, but couldn't in the game. Because in the game, this is a disaster, because black has this. So yeah, so this move gave black a free tempo to make threats with the queen, right? If the queen were on e7, this queen g4 wouldn't exist. But knight f5 made the threats more dangerous. So bishop f1, g2? Huh. This was my idea. Oh, I got a few challenges. Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know why that sequence of letters would be censored. Maybe I don't want to know, to be honest, but I can try and figure that out later. Yeah, so just double up, but why is this? Yeah, actually, it's interesting because the reason this is so dangerous is still this knight e5. Yeah, this knight e5 is just monstrous. It surprises me just how strong that is here. Because I thought I'd be able to take and run away. But not quite. So now we're talking... Now, if I can't take and allow knight e5, we're talking about much more long-term problems for white. Thanks for the follow, Blaskins. Yeah, then this is quite tricky. That's a nice resource. I'll have to remember that for this kind of attack. Because that could come up again in this h6, g5 Italian-style attack. Oh. Well, I had 3 seconds left, but there was this, of course. So, trade-off of inaccuracies. Yeah, and this is too slow. Now I get rook h1 and the attack is gone. So this makes sense. Because now you have the same thing. If I ever take, this knight comes here. You have knight h2 now as well. Yeah, so, I mean, at this point we're both in a time scramble. Yeah, and some trade-off of errors. Yeah, interesting here. But this idea, just avoiding opening the king side at all costs, that's a noteworthy one. Yeah, it makes sense here that even just playing d5 is good, otherwise just play h3 and be patient. Alright, good game. Yeah, knight e5 is just crushing there, because my queen is the one just gluing the g-file closed. Yeah, let's do Rossalimo. And like in e4, e5, I like a lot of the c3 lines. Just trying to set up this really strong center. I mean, it always feels slow, but c3, d4 can just give white a big advantage in all kinds of lines if black doesn't respond to it correctly. Concretely, though, this line is, of course, objectively fine for black. All of this is pretty well known. I actually picked this up for white because I was getting annoyed by it as black. C takes. Yeah, that bishop b6, queen e7, in that like that. I don't know if I've ever seen it like that before. Interesting. So you've got your nice Magnus-style sideline then. Yeah, so takes, pawn takes, this is pretty common. There was a game Caruana Dubov in a structure like this. My idea is twofold, like lock out this bishop and lock this pawn on c6. So long term, my dream is to just dominate the c5 square and put a lot of pressure on this pawn. I also have some ideas, depending on what black does, of maybe going bishop h6 and targeting the king side. That bishop b6, queen e7 is common. I work here, so I play b3. So this is another line that objectively is reasonable for black, but black I think has to be quite careful. Because if white gets what they want, strategically black is in a lot of trouble here. $17,000. Wow. I guess that's relative, though. I don't know how many games are in the main lines. But it also, right, it only matters how often your opponents face it, too. So I'd be curious about the percentage. Maybe I got it in a simul at some point. But aside from that, I'm pretty sure I've never faced it. Bishop a6. So knight here feels very natural to me, because I might want to go here, I might want to take. Could go here, but I don't see any particular reason to. Bishop h6, I mean, just giving black c5 does not make much sense to me here. So let's just do this. Again, continuing with the plan. Unless black has something concrete here, I really like this for me. Because now c5 is gone. c5 is never happening. Any reason to do the other rook? I don't think so. Yeah, so you're talking about less than 1 in 1,000 then. Or sorry, a little more than 1 in 1,000. Bishop here. Sorry, rook here. So this gives me some tactical ideas on this diagonal, which I will make use of. Bishop here. Yeah, black could have played e5 there to preserve the material, but it was still strategically miserable. Yeah. And just trade down. Pawn. I mean, you can see, right, even now this bishop doesn't get to do very much. It's often an unhappy piece in this line, if white gets what they want. What's the simplest way? I'll just push the pawn. Black can have d4. Good game. Let me see, I have one more challenge. This will be the last one for a bit, and then I'll review the rest of the games. And stick with e4 for today. Alright, give him a minute. There we are. Here, so there's two knights, there's Scotch Gambit, and there's just the slower stuff. Let's just play the classic. So bishop c5, yeah, so we're kind of transposing then. We're transposing to the infinitely popular mainline Italians. Playing knight f6 first gives black some other ideas, like just bishop e7, d6. Which leads to a slower game, I would say, also fine for black. But of course, transposing like this is perfectly good as well. I would say you want to specialize in one until like you're at least expert level. The vast majority of people, I would say, should specialize in one. Yeah, here there's infinite number of move order nuances. I'm going to play h3. Just eliminate some g4 ideas for the bishop and the knight later on. Makes d5 a little tougher, although not impossible for black to play here. Yeah, d6. So now, side play. I'm going to go for a4. Yeah, so this takes back the queenside space, makes the bishop safe. Does mean I can use this square later in some situations. So one thing is that black has this plan of going here and playing f5. Against that, as I recall, it's good to have knight c3 still. So I'm going to delay c3 one more move and see what black wants to do. I could also just go bishop g5. That's another set of options. Either c3 or h3, but not both. So I could play these positions. Or I could just play knight bd2. Maybe I just go for the takes style positions. Let me do this first, though. Yeah, again, there's probably several dozen slightly different ways white can play these positions. Like, instead of a4, going c3 and bishop back here is less popular nowadays, but it's another perfectly good way to preserve the bishop. I should mention, the reason white does these queenside ideas is that knight a5 trading off this bishop is strategically bad. So white, in one way or another, makes sure this bishop is safe from being traded for that knight. Let's do this now. Yeah, because you could play c3 here as well, but against c3 I think d5 is easier for black. There's less pressure with this square still being open. If black goes for d5, I'm going to take and go rook e1. And you can give black some difficulties there. Although it's also playable. Yeah, here? Yeah, d4 takes, bishop b4, not to be recommended. This bishop's pretty good. If I trade it off, takes d5, queen c2. The one awkward thing for black in the Italian is this knight. Like, black would like to be able to push their pawn as well. Do I even go queen b3 here, actually? I don't think I do it yet. Let's just go here. Yeah, to be honest, these positions are a little dry. And that's why here I usually play Scotch Gambit. These gets a much more dynamic game. Like, in the same way I play the Winnow or French, I play this for the same reasons. So now I was thinking about queen b3 here. Takes. Let's try it. Yeah, the mainline Scotch. The mainline Scotch, you have to really know what you're doing. It's so easy for white to get in so much trouble in those lines. Oh, queen f6. I think knight b5 there, right? And then bishop c5, queen f3. As I recall, I think that version works out pretty well. So now I feel like I've got a bit of an edge here, because black's piece placement's a little awkward. Yeah, I think take d5 and taking was a little premature, because now I've got some definite threats. Yeah, it's just hard for black to respond to. Oh, good game. Well, I don't think it was anywhere near resignable. Black could still play queen d8 here and keep an eye on both of these. I have some ideas there. Of course, white's better. Actually, probably a lot better, but could still play it out. All right, good game. So let's see. We'll just go through these in order. So this was against Brightonian. Nerves during tournaments and through games. To be honest, the main way is I just played so many games that it became a normal thing for me. That's the main piece of advice I have. I guess during a game, yeah, I don't have any technique or anything. I just kind of, I will be honest, I just kind of force the nerves to quiet down, so to speak. You're welcome. Yeah, so this is a pretty common line. So this is the Fisher line of the Caro-Kann. It's, again, this is a QGD structure. Queen's Gambit declined, colors reversed, but with perfect development. So this is like the best QGD black could get. But again, that's still just equal, objectively. Hey, Rainbow Teddies. I mean, it depends where you are. Yeah, it really depends where you are. I guess I would try and look up what chess clubs are in your area. I don't know if there's one website that just lists all the clubs that you can search geographically. I mean, I'm lucky enough, I live in the Bay Area, and it's very, very easy to find chess here. A lot of places, I imagine, it's much more difficult. Yeah, so this whole setup's pretty normal. Again, black can go bishop f5 here. White can take... White can also just go back. I think that's actually underrated. But this is the whole thing. You don't have to play this. There's also bishop g4. And again, you're basically playing a QGD, a bishop g5 QGD with colors reversed. Although white did this weird fianchetto in that case. h5. Yeah, e5 really feels wrong here. I mean, it's not losing, but again, it's a good IQP, and a good IQP means that the other player is not going to have any fun. I mean, good IQP for white, in the sense good to face. So, not lost, but... Incidentally, I noticed Lichess recently has taken away the feature where if you hover these games, it shows you the move they played. Does anyone know if there's a way to reinstate that, a setting? I'm curious. Oh, it really does not like this already. Should be 3. I mean, in general, you're trying to do this plan. And then white usually counters it with c4. So this is the whole thing. But this, I would say, again, only if you're getting some kind of play. Because it's pretty easy for white to put pressure on. Yeah, and objectively, black should just take, because this gives me the e7 square. Yeah, and now black's just running into all kinds of trouble. Alright, well, thanks for watching. I will be live again soon. Have a good one. Yeah, and as he mentioned, knight g5 is just crushing here already. So rook e1, I mean, while completely winning, is not the fastest. Yeah. And that's that. Alright, so this was the French against Michael Scarn. So played the advance. And I went for this line I mentioned. The most common way for black to play is just knight c6. And there's a couple directions the game can go from there. This is a less common, but still pretty popular plan, to just trade off black's bad bishop right away. Of course, at the cost of a few tempi. If white wants to prevent it, they can do knight takes d4 here. And this leads to, yeah, this whole structure. Pretty similar to one of the blitz games I played earlier, actually. Yeah, here, and again, as I mentioned, objectively, black should transpose to this gambit. This gambit, I think, is... I mean, you have to be careful. You can certainly lose quickly as black, but objectively, I think black is better. There's a whole line. You play a6, you cover this, and... yeah, I could spend a while talking about just this, but suffice to say, theoretically, that's good for black. But I went for this. And again, long-term strategically, this is good. But it's just hard to develop. I mean, black's behind in development, white's already castled, and these pieces have a tough time finding homes. Like, knight f5 I'd like to play, but then you have to watch out for this. Yeah, so this was actually an idea I hadn't tried in a position like this before. I guess usually, the few times I've essayed this, white hasn't played this quite so quickly. So this makes sense as a response to b4, because otherwise white could just play b3, and this knight has nothing to do. So this seemed reasonable enough. Yeah, and it does feel... I know, I always like playing positions like this, where I have to deal with whatever initiative my opponent can generate, but the long-term strategic nature of the position is in my favor. And I think you get some of that in these riskier French lines. Yeah, already it prefers black a bit, so I'm wondering, what exactly does it want white to do here? It's a good question. Oh, even just the kingside pawn push makes a lot of sense. This is always good against the French now, when you have this pawn here. Yeah, and just transfer to the king side and say, okay, what are you doing? You have this knight on c4, but what is it actually doing? Yeah, a few different moves here. You could even just play knight d2. If you don't do that, if you're not following neural net engines. Yeah, I mean, in general, that makes a lot of sense. And it wants to just trade to prevent that. And again, black has a good bishop and a good knight, but white's just gotten this queenside space. White's quite happy here. But again, there's just long-term very good possibilities for my pieces. I was always happy to play a position like this. Because I think it's quite tricky to play these positions as white, even when the computer likes it. There are certain players who I think are really, really good at it. But it takes a lot to get really, really good at it. Yeah, and these positions, these positions have a way sometimes of it's just drifting into black's favor. Doesn't even want to bother with the trade, just here. It's not worried at all about white keeping material. Okay, and this is still manageable, but better for black, without doubt. Thanks for the follow, Zero. Yeah, now I just walk into the position. Oh, it just wants to take the pawn right away. Again, it just does not care about this. It's just too slow. You always have to decide how much you want to grab for right away. Curious, what does it actually do here? So, okay, just knight b4 and queen c2. That makes sense. White can't keep the queen here for any amount of time. And once you've gotten the a-pawn, every endgame is completely hopeless for white. But that's that. Yeah, again, I think positions like this, even if the computer gives white an advantage, they're just quite tricky for white to play in practice. It's part of why I like playing them as black. Alright, next game. Ah, this was this Italian. So again, a few options here. Just going for pianissimo. All of this is pretty major. Ah, so c3 first is standard. Is there something wrong with a4? I guess it makes sense. There's no need to rush this. Like, if black's going to play a5 anyway, or a6, then I'd rather have c3 than a4. That makes sense. That's right. But I think this is perfectly playable, too. I think that's a minute difference, if any. e1, bishop e6. So I can take... You'll see this structure all the time at Super GM level. Black often goes for some play like this. White can manage it, but it gives black good dynamic balance for a slightly weakened structure. Sometimes white goes for this and gets a space advantage. Whole set of positions. Again, if you watch Super GM games, you'll see these kinds of Italians all the time. That's why part of why I usually avoid them. So c3. And I think just slightly more pleasant for white. Black really wishes this knight weren't in the way. Black wishes it were here, for example. And then black would want to play c6 and later on d5. The Scotch against GMs. In Classical, not really. I have played it here and there. Faster time controls, definitely. But mostly I play these kinds of positions. Yeah, this I think is just a little too fast. Because Black's got some difficulties here and some difficulties here. So yeah, in fact, this is already quite tricky. Because I'm going to start dominating the board. Too drawish. I mean, it is really complex. I would say it's complex enough that despite the symmetry, there's a lot of room to win these positions, particularly for white. I suppose part of it is just that I find them relatively dull. Like, you saw I play the Winnower, the Scotch Gambit, and the way these games went. So I just like playing those better. This certainly isn't the worst line in the world to play for a win. As you see at top level, right? This is white's most popular choice nowadays. Yeah, and this, I mean, this certainly isn't over. Black has a couple moves that secure everything, but it's unpleasant. He just gave up here. All right, with one more game, I'm gonna wrap up the stream. Actually, how long has it been? Oh, 2 hours 12. Flew by. Yeah, so Rossalimo. This is my go-to against knight c6. I feel like it's more promising than Sveshnikov in general. There's a lot of things black can do here. Granted, there's a lot of things black can do here too. But I think white has good prospects for an advantage here if they have their homework done. Yeah, knight f6. All this is pretty well known. You can play e5 here. This enters some sharp territory, but you really have to know what you're doing. Yeah, all of this again. Very well known. This is a move I saw, I think, Fabi play against Dubov. And he won a nice game. Yeah, strategically, maybe just a little annoying for black. Maybe queen takes is safer. Because this b takes just runs the danger that if you don't get to play c5, your position can just become awful. Yeah, so I've seen this before. This a5, a4. But again, I guess black has some... How does this go? Here. I think the advantage of this, yeah, is white can't play rook b1. So black gets some play here. Yeah, black has to do something like this. Even here, I'd rather be white, though. Like, this whole pawn structure just feels so good for white to me. So it's a position I like, even when black plays it correctly. And again, if black's at all imprecise here, it's kind of like that IQP game. Black can just be unhappy for a long time. Yeah, h3 instead of bishop e3. I think the problem I'd be nervous about here is you're losing a lot of control over c5. You don't have time for this maneuver, which is what I did in the game. And that means that this becomes much harder to stop. So he takes, rook b8. Thanks for the follow, Echo Send. And welcome. Yeah, now this is just not fun for black. I mean, black's gonna be just burning the midnight oil for a draw. Thanks for the follow, North Carolina, Dan. Yeah, this unfortunately for black stumbles into a tactical shot, which is this. Yeah, so that makes things just that much worse because now the e-file opens up for me. I mean, black can go here, but again, positionally, this is just so unpleasant. I think white's going to win this pretty much every time. Blockade here, this is weak, this knight is wonderful. This bishop has nothing to do. Yeah, this is why I like this line as white, though. It does not take much from black to walk into something like this. Yeah, and there's not much left to talk about here. Yeah, quite a tricky line. I think maybe the easiest way to sidestep this is to play this as black. Then white has more play oriented around the c-file and the dark squares, rather than targeting this pawn. Yeah, so with that, I'm going to call it here. I hope you all enjoyed the blitz. I'll do that again soon. Simul's on the weekends. Maybe I'll stick with Thursdays for these streams. And see you all soon.